we don't know from your end.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and Honourable Councillors.
Oh, Paul is fine. Paul is perfect.
Okay, well, that's all right. Well, nice to meet you all, and I think Jenny Giblin's probably online somewhere.
I think I saw her.
I'm not getting the full screen here, but I've got most of the key people. I think I'll try and bring up some others. But thank you very much for the opportunity of talking about this project. It's a rather poignant day, given that today was the last day of our involvement in Afghanistan. And of course, I'm talking about the end of World War I, some 102 years ago. So quite a gap between the two. But the important thing for me is to really give you a couple of stories to think about, because this is quite a big project in the way it has quite national significance, though it's not a big project in terms of millions of dollars. I'm glad to say that we have raised over $9 million now, and we're still moving ahead, which I'm very pleased about. But one thing that's occurred, of course, in the last couple of years, COVID has changed everything. And there's no way that we can stand up and say, these are the number of visitors who will go to Le Quesnoy in the next 5 years. No one would have any idea at all. So we are adjusting to that and making sure that we live within our current income and current donations, but still recognize the memorial sense of what this project is all about. I suppose the best starting point is to say, well, why are we doing this now, and why didn't the government do it, 100 years ago? Well, in my time in government, I didn't have much success in convincing anybody this was something to be worked on. And I can assure you that even as a former Deputy Prime Minister, you don't have any more leverage at all. But I decided, having been to this place more than 25 years ago, we owed it to those who served and died in the World War I, more than what is there at the present time. And I say that with quite strongly. I'm just going to hold up a little booklet here, and that booklet is all about World War I battlefields. It tells you where to go to hear about the battles, hear about what was happening through that period. There's no mention of New Zealand in that booklet, because that booklet refers to the current museums on those old battlefields. So if you want to know what the British Army did, you go to the British memorials. You want to know what the South African Army did, you go to the South African Museum, or the Indian Museum, or the American Museum, or the Canadian Museum, or the Australian museums, because they've got two museums on the Western Front. These are all places where their own citizens can go and spend time and dwell and hear those stories and read about those stories and visualize those stories. And what we're doing in Le Quesnoy, here's this little town right up near the Belgian border, the last battle of the New Zealand division in World War I, where they liberated the town. What a better place to tell the New Zealand story. Because otherwise you could wander over the whole of the Western Front. Yes, you will see gravestones of New Zealanders, you will see memorials for New Zealand, but you don't see a place where you can read about and hear about those New Zealand stories. And this is why I'm determined this project in Le Quesnoy will succeed. Determined that it becomes a place that New Zealanders of all types will go to. You could spend a couple of days there, you could spend a week there, you could spend a week traveling around all of the Western Front battlefields. But our soldiers at that time deserve more than just what is there at the present time, which is a single plaque on a wall and those other memorials I talked about. So We have been able to sell this successfully to a lot of people, and as I say, we have brought in some nearly 9.5 million. I'm pleased to say that from local authorities throughout New Zealand, we brought in, I think, about 200,000, which I'm very pleased about, because we are going to make sure we look after our donors for time immemorial. And there will be donors' names that will feature in Lurkenwa for some time to come. Now, I am, of course, well aware that Hamilton City has a long period of sister city relationship with Ypres, that wonderful town in the Belgium area that we're talking about. You know all about Menengate. You do know about, you've heard about Passchendaele, the Battle of Passchendaele, the Third Battle of Ypres. You've heard about the Battle of Bapaume. You've heard about Messines Ridge. You know all about these things, and you can walk around these places and you hear that New Zealand was there, but there's not a place that you can go to really study it, as you would if you were an Australian at the Australian Museum or a Canadian at the Canadian museums. So that we're going to change. But let me come back to Ypres, because, you know, there's always a number of sides to the story. At the end of World War I, of course, there was a determination that we would participate in some of these memorials. You all know, those of you who've been to the Western Front will have been to Ypres and you've been to Menengate. We were asked to financially contribute to Menengate. We said no. We were asked to contribute to Passchendaele. We said no. We were asked to contribute to the Messines Ridge. We said no. We just didn't want to know any more about World War I. Now, that was of the time. That was in the 1920s. You know, our troops had come home. We were hit with the Spanish flu. More people died of the Spanish flu in New Zealand than died in World War I. So we'd been hit pretty heavily. Then we get into a depression and, you know, things get forgotten. And then suddenly we're in World War II. Well, you know, our troops and those we lost, the 12,500 soldiers we lost in World War I, deserved more than that. And this is what we're talking about, is catching up and being able to provide something on the Western Front that New Zealanders can go to. And here's this quaint little town of Lurkenwa. I often tried to find a comparison. It might be Patararua or something like that. Not a big town. It's an agriculture town, surrounded by orchards, surrounded by wheat growing areas. It's not a wealthy town at all. But every year, the people of Lurkenwa, even now, 102 years later, are still thanking New Zealand for what we did, what our antecedents did, what General Russell and the New Zealand Division did in 1918. And that, to me, is we should be able to meet them more than halfway. By doing something significant in the town, we're actually providing a center point in the town which more than just the local people will come to. We would envisage having visitors from Belgium, from Germany, from the United Kingdom, apart from Australia and New Zealand. So this is where we are, moving quite strongly. And I believe that within the next 2 years, there will be signs that we are really serious about what has been established on the site. And we're now looking at probably Anzac Day 2023 as being a significant time to be able to cut the ribbon and show people what we've achieved with our fundraising and delivering to the people of Lurkenwa what we should have delivered probably 100 years ago. So we're just about there. If you can help us, that's fine. Local authorities in New Zealand have given us anything from about 10 cents per citizen up to $1.20 per citizen. But look, that's entirely up to you, and of course, whatever you want to do. But it's important for me that as many people around New Zealand do know what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. So thank you very much. I won't say your worship again, Paula, and appreciate the opportunity you've given me to just highlight some of the story.
Cool, thank you. So what is it, we're going to get some questions, but what are you looking for from councils around New Zealand for this project?
Well,
So-
we put the challenge, $1 per citizen spread over 3 years. Now, of course, that's fine for some authorities, and they are doing their best to do it. I couldn't say my old colleague Phil Goff's about to go into his pocket for $1.5 million at the present time with all the other issues he's got in front of them. But slowly, I believe others will find a reason to want to be involved.
Thank you. Councillors, any questions or comments?
Thanks, Don. That's fascinating, and I like what you're doing. What's the RSA's involvement in this?
Well, one of our important people on our committees, General Mataparai, former Governor General and former CDF, he and I had a meeting with the RSA less than 6 months ago because we want to involve them. We feel they should be there. They want to be there, but they say quite candidly, we've got no money at all. And I can accept that because principally they are raising funds for their more elderly members to ensure that they look after their own, and to press them for money really at the present time just wouldn't get very far. But on the other hand, to me, they have a role in the overall remembrance side of this issue. I mean, the RSA did come out of World War I, and to me, I think we can make sure we can fit them in, but I'm not depending on them to be a fundraiser.
Okay, thank you.
Martin.
Yes, I'm not, sadly, I'm not familiar. I haven't visited World War I. I have had the privilege of going to the D-Day landings, and thanks to a couple of very close friends, I got to visit the Canadian Memorial at Juno Beach, for example. And one of the things that really moved me, impressed me, was the young Canadians there. So the whole Juno Beach Canadian, where the Canadians landed and where my father-in-law was driving the boats in, was about Canadian history and their involvement in the landing. But what really impressed me was the interaction with the young Canadian students and who had had opportunity to come across. So I'm wondering if you or your colleague could just perhaps clarify that the opportunities that would be there, say, for New Zealand students, young New Zealanders, that interaction. And frankly, the Juno Beach, genuinely, because I knew very little of the Canadian role until then, it really moved me.
Well, you're absolutely right. And I've also visited the Normandy beaches, and, the Canadians were one of the first ashore, and they were slaughtered. They were slaughtered by huge numbers because they were the first on the beach and they just got it. So it's that particular memorial, World War II memorial in Normandy for the Canadians, is very, very important. But you made a very valid point, and I see this is something that we want to work towards, although I wouldn't want to try and make decisions now. I would like to think that in a couple of years' time, through the northern summer, that is from about April through to October, we would have young New Zealand sort of interns in Le Quesnoy at our museum, just smiling at every visitor, welcoming and telling them the New Zealand story. And I think if we can do that, it just helps the overall understanding. Apart from you bring young New Zealanders, now people who are not even 20 years old, they were all born this century. They should know. They should know about the sheer bravery and the ingenuity and the humanity of the New Zealand division in World War I. It was a remarkable division, and it actually New Zealand division led that run across the Western Front for the last 3 months. They were the lead division all the time because they were such an efficient, capable division under General Russell. So yes, young people, I would hope that we can somehow engage them. We can't meet all their pay and rations, but this is where, you know, local communities could help, that sort of thing to make it happen.
Any
So
other
Don, yeah, so Don, I've had my hand up before, but I haven't.
Sorry.
Obviously, the mayor hasn't captured it on her screen. Look, first of all, thank you so much for your passion in your presentation. I feel very blessed to have visited Lucanois and, in fact, was the guest of the mayor there and the guest of the mayor of Bodeni, which is the next little tinier village next door. And I do have a question, but I'll take the opportunity. The one thing that I took away from my 2 or 3 visits there was this huge ongoing respect and for the New Zealand troops, particularly the way we took Lucanois, that, you know, we had an alternative to bomb the city with artillery, but we chose to put ourselves in harm's way. But what it meant was we were able to secure the city without much damage. I also add, which I find fascinating, in fact, I brought back some of the original memorabilia that I gave to Councillor Boss from Messine. And in fact, it's ironic that we developed this close relationship with IPRA, when in fact, the purpose of the trip that brought some of that back was to visit Lucanois. So my question is, could you explain just in a slightly broader sense what you see the memorial looking like, and just walk me through that a little bit more, and just remind me of the total quantum you're wanting to raise?
Well, thank you very much. Just only too delighted to. First of all, we do now own the largest piece of real estate in the town under a single title, which is the former mayor's residence. One time a convent, one time a hospital, one time the Gestapo headquarters and all the rest of it. But we own that piece of land. It includes the chateau, which of course was the gendarmerie headquarters for many years. It's our intention to completely restore the chateau. And we're actually onto that right now, talking to the architects, talking to the builders, because we've got the money, we want to get on with it. That will form the core to the visitor centre. That'll be the place where people will come to find out other things. Alongside the chateau, of course, are 9 maisonettes. We're using one maisonette as a caretaker now. I can see we can use another maisonette maybe for more museum purposes or visitor purposes. We can also use some of these maisonettes for Airbnb. We want to make use of the buildings we've got before we even contemplate building something new. And we've decided with COVID-19, now's not the time to plan for a building. Let's just leave that, let that push to one side. We are talking about also maybe doing a couple of things in the town itself to draw attention to the fact that there is a museum, there is a New Zealand Centre, there is an information centre for New Zealanders when they come there. So this is what we see emerging in the next few years. And the mayor herself, the lovely Marie-Sophie Linné, she's very keen to actually possibly use our museum as the main information centre for the town, which brings even more people into our domain. So, and looking out a little bit and coming back to one of your colleague councillors' questions, you know, there's a possibility of using one of the maisonettes as a sort of place for study for students of international relations who want to, you know, sit there and study and look at these things over a long period of time, in which case that would be of great use as well, and providing an extra breadth of activity on the site.
And the overall quantum, Sir Don, that you're...
Well, we've always been aiming for 15 million, but given the uncertainty COVID has created, I would like to say, and I'm not saying that, I mean, I'm saying it to you, it becomes public, obviously, but look, if we get to about 12 million by the end of this year, we're going to be moving on pretty rapidly with the development I've talked about, but we're not including any new building in that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ryan.
Thanks, Paula. Thank you, Sir Dom. Just a couple of questions, probably following on from Ewan's there. And forgive me if you've already answered this, but in terms of as central government, what's the contribution they've made to this?
Well, I've tried to get them heavily involved for a number of years and have been utterly unsuccessful, but I did press them a few years ago to make it advantageous for New Zealand donors. Under law as it was then, a New Zealand donor did not get a tax rebate, even though we have charitable status in New Zealand. They passed a one-off amendment to the Tax Act a couple of years ago, and so New Zealand donors now do get a tax rebate. Because of COVID, of course, we were slowed right down, and I had to go back to Inland Revenue Minister Parker a few months ago and say, please extend this because we've lost a whole year. So they are about to extend it. They have committed themselves to extend it. That bill will be part of the Income Tax Act and passed early next year, but the tax rebate still prevails now until 2022. And when the amendment is passed, it'll go through till 2024. So that's their contribution. Now, look,
Okay,
I'm prepared to say that I believe this is going to be very successful. I believe there is a role for the New Zealand government, but I'm not about to go and press on them at the present time. I'd like them to see that we can be successful on the ground first, and then invite them to be a long-term partner.
sure. So at this stage, it's essentially an indirect contribution.
Correct.
With that tax.
Correct.
Okay, and in terms of something that we're obviously cognizant of, and I'm sure you are, is with these projects, is the CapEx to get the thing up and running, and then the ongoing operational costs. And I'm just wondering if you factored some of those in, or potentially you've got to come back and do the rounds in 3 years' time.
We know very well the operational costs of these things can sometimes cause more problems than the capital costs. The capital costs are easy to define. Yes, we are factoring these in, although we're now redoing our numbers because simply our original proposal was that the eight maisonettes could be used for Airbnb, visiting cyclists, long-term rentals, which would provide a significant income to help offset the operational costs. We've had to redo that and therefore reschedule our operational costs. We're doing that right now. So we're very conscious of it. But I say one more thing here, because currently this is a charitable trust of which I'm the chairman, along with 5 other private enthusiasts. That cannot last forever. We're probably good for the next 3 to 5 to 7 years. I'm now talking to possibility of long-term equity partners. Auckland Museum wants to be there. They are a war memorial museum. They see that the work they are doing has been very relevant. I'm also talking to some tertiary educational institutions, inviting them to look at the possibility of a long-term equity involvement. And that would give them the opportunity to be sending students to do work in Europe and things like that. Not just military historians, but you're in the middle of a massive agricultural area in France there. So those are the kind of partnerships I'm looking to developing, which will carry this for the next 100 years.
Okay, and final question, just putting a sort of a Hamilton-centric lens on. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you know what kind of specific involvement Hamiltonians had in terms of creating a linkage if we were to, sort of sell the narrative in terms of our local commitment to this nationwide cause? Do you know what that might be?
Well, the Waikato Regiment was very much part of the New Zealand division. which was going across the Western Front at that time. And any member of the Waikato Division at that time would have either passed through Lurkenwa onto the wood beyond Mormal Wood, or would have been part of the liberation of Lurkenwa. So the Waikato Regiment is a significant part of this. And I think that was one of the reasons, of course, you know, that Hamilton developed its own relationship with EPA.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bunting, I think.
Thanks, Mayor Paula, and back again live. Look, this has been really interesting. And well, of course, probably like most of my colleagues, while you've been speaking, I've been madly Wikipediaing, Googling Lurkenwa and etc. There seems to be a bit of a Kiwi footprint there already in the form of like a giant, what do they call it? The giant Māori statue and a few monuments, etc. Can you just sort of let me know what our footprint is there at present?
Well, there is, and I wouldn't wish to dwell on the Maori statue. It's not the sort of thing that we would hold up as being representative of our history very much at all. But look, it's what they put there in the first place. It's up to us to try and sort of bring them round. There is, of course, a plaque on the wall where the ladders were put on the wall, that Lieutenant Averill could climb up the ladder and get to the top of the wall. That's the main thing. That's the main New Zealand identity. Now, of course, for those of you who've been there, you walk around the town and you will see place names for various New Zealanders. My obvious colleague Helen Clark has got a Ruda Helen Clark and a Ruda Adrian Macy, who was one of our ambassadors there, plus the All Blacks. So there's a sort of a New Zealand flavour in the town anyway, but it's a bit patchy. And we just want to see a more significant presence and something that's got substance and breadth in it, not just a piece of masonry.
Right.
I'll also add, of course, you know, you're looking at a little town which goes back 1,000 years. The walls around this town were built by the military engineer Vauban 150 years before Napoleon was even born. So this town has been the subject of siege over many, many centuries. It was part of the Spanish Netherlands at one time. It was part of different empires. The Holy Roman Empire covered it. So it's been buffeted around, but you know, we tend to see the history of Lurkenwa from the time the New Zealand Division arrived, but the enormous history before that and the walls around this town are something to behold. If you're any knowledge of engineering and say to yourself, how the hell did they build those things 250 years ago? It does pose some huge questions and interest.
Yeah, it's some of it dates back to Julius Caesar time, so it's pretty interesting. But I just so it's interesting, the Ruda Helen Clark and the Ruda All Blacks and the likes. It all seems to have been quite scattergun approached, but it seems to be quite an influence over there. Who drove all that back then? Was it the government?
It's been very patchy. It's been very patchy, you see, and this is where I can be a little bit critical of the government. When I say the government, I'm talking about successive governments. Because you know, John Key's government, whom I was a bit familiar with, they put aside 15 million for World War I commemorations. Now, what they got for that 15 million was the establishment of that World War I facility in Wellington, the tunnel, you know, near the old Dominion Museum. That was one part of the expenditure. Part of the expenditure went to the Te Arai Trail through the Western Front, which you can follow on your phone. But the rest of the money was mostly spent on sending officials to various commemorations, whether it was the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of the Passchendaele, the Battle of Ypres. And, you know, these are one-off things. So the amount of money we've spent, we taxpayers have spent commemorating World War I, unfortunately, when I talked to the chairman of this particular World War I committee, which was then Brian Roach, now Sir Brian Roach, he said, I said, what happened to Lurkenwa, Brian? He said, well, unfortunately, we ran out of money in 2017. So when it came to 2018, which was the centenary of Lurkenwa, there was no money left. And this is why it's all been very patchy over the years.
I see.
And look, we do have, ministers, prime ministers, governors general, even mayors going off to these commemorations, but that's a 1-day thing, a 2-day thing, and then they come home again. If all that money had been accumulated, we could have something really significant there. But I'm not complaining. I'm just saying now's the time to do it. We've waited 100 years. Let's get on with it.
Great. Thanks, Adon.
Thank you. Well, thank you for sharing that. And I thought it was really important that councillors got the opportunity to hear from you directly. And as you know, one question I do have is that Hamilton does, as Lance alluded to, and someone else, have that strong relationship with EPA and telling the story about EPA. So that's been our primary relationship. And of course, Cambridge has had Le Quinois, and, different places across New Zealand have done different things. How would you see any money that came from Hamilton City being able to give strength to that EPA relationship as well?
I've met the mayor of EPA and I've been to the various functions there, and I think they know it, that these there's so many sort of World War I sites, and again, you've got the Canadians in one place, the Australians here, and someone else here. I think they all understand that us developing something significant at Le Quinois would not be competing with EPA. EPA has carved itself out as having, well, as you know, it's a new town. It was only built in the 1920s after the war. And Menin Gate is an extraordinary piece of architecture and sculpture. And the event that occurs there every night is something, visitors will always go to, including, previous mayors of Hamilton. And that's fine. So I just don't see it as being a direct competitor. We'll be selling something different in a different way.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much for that. We will have further conversation amongst ourselves as to what place Hamilton feels and come back to you. But I imagine that you'll be crystallising your request of Hamilton City Council potentially for the annual plan and such. So that's the chance where we make adjustments to what we're spending. So no promises there, of course, but also that, we can have that conversation around what it is you would like to see happen and how it's going at that point in time. Is that a fine way forward?
Fine. No, I think and again, spreading something over 3 years would be absolutely perfect for us in terms of, our sort of significant dates.
Okay, thank you so much for coming. And like I say, rather than me trying to relay your vision and your story to all councillors, I thought it was really important to give them the opportunity to hear from you, understand the vision, and ask their questions. So that's been achieved today. So thank you very much. Hope you don't have to stay in lockdown too much longer.
The penalty being in the Auckland Council area, right?
Oh yes, you are too. Yeah, well, we're a tiny bit luckier because we can get all those wonderful McDonald's and KFC now.
Thank you. I will get our folk to send through to you again some of our material that I think I was talking to Carmen earlier. She could pass around councillors for them to have a look at.
Yeah, brilliant. I did give them only a skim over it when you spoke to me last, and I thought it was better for a face-to-face and then a follow-up. So
right.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Councillors, I think.
Thank you, councillors.
Not a problem. See you.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, councillors,
Thank you.
we have something at what time, James? What's the next item? It's the Te Awa Lakes. What time's that coming on? Can I just see?
I think it's 11:30. I'm just double checking.
11:30. So we'd have a 20-minute.
11:45. It's scheduled for Paula.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
James, can it be brought forward?
I don't know. I should ask. I'll ring Blair if he's not on now and just check that. Hang on a sec.
Just give a quick group text or message and we can come on.
Yeah, I'll text him.
I was thinking 11:30 might. Yeah, Ryan?
It's just an internal presentation. It's just an internal presentation, I think.
I was just checking though, yeah, but I'm not
Dave
sure
will
whether
say, so
someone else
hopefully
is
they-
coming. Ryan, someone else may be coming. Wasn't there someone going to present to us?
I think they're
Councillors,
going to present it strategic growth on the 7th.
They are that, but I'm just asking. Hopefully, I'll
Okay.
call them.
Let's find out. Becca?
no, I was just going to say we could follow up, Dave, but Dave's already on the phone, so that's fine.
Okay, because I think
Question,
perhaps-
Paul.
yeah.
I can get them.
Just a question, if I could, on the last item.
Hi.
Yeah, do go. I
Uh,
didn't want
11:30,
in front of him.
the next
Yeah,
one.
Dave.
Go.
There you go.
Right.
I was just wondering, I don't know what everyone else thinks or anything, but I was just wondering, what is, I guess when I was trying to put a Hamilton lens on it, he sparked my interest when he talked about the Waikato militia. And I just wondered, what are Waikato Regional Council? Do you know if there's any alignment, because if anything, it would be good to probably do it as a group if we did, rather than individual council.
Lance may be able to answer that. We can find out, but
Yeah,
Cambridge have a close
we're
association.
not want to interrupt. I assume we're still in public meeting, right?
We're in
Oh,
a,
okay.
We're
Are
in
we?
a public session, is that
Correct, it's
Well,
still
yes.
being live streamed.
we're
Yeah.
live streamed. Okay.
okay? So I'm respectful of being a
I'll
public
I'll
meeting.
stop
but
dancing.
No,
no,
no.
but certainly,
That's a
sorry,
good question.
didn't mean
because
to interrupt you, Ryan. Sorry.
we can actually find that out, no trouble, what our neighbours are doing. And I don't know about regional council. I haven't had any discussion with them, but I'm slightly more aware of what Waipa do with their war memorial associations, etc.
Aren't they a sister city of Leukuna?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They are.
Hey,
Cambridge.
we can start at 11:30, by the way, Paula.
Oh, brilliant. Any
Rob's
other
got his
questions?
hand up.
Oh, yeah. Can't see it on your little screens today. I have to look on the list. Go.
Paul, what's the proposed direction of travel for this? Because I know we have, in my time on council, we've previously considered this request twice.
Yeah.
So is it intended that this will come back as a report to a council meeting?
No,
Is
I
it-
think
is
we'll test interest in a conversation, maybe one of the elected members updates, because if there is no interest, there's no point in going too far with it. But out of respect for the project and the people behind it, I did feel it was really important that we heard from them ourselves rather than making some kind of. So they do know, for example, that I'm concerned about the relationship with EPA, and because we've chosen that one to be our relationship, so we have to consider how that might be dealt with in this at all. But Martin.
Yes, well, obviously, this is open meeting, would certainly be welcoming an appropriate update and transparent public report. Would be really just building again on what Councillor Wilson has said around the history. There is a history there, which he's alluded to, alerted us to. I'm also respectful of both former Councillor Boss, but also Ollie Tiua, with his military background and history. So I really would like a deep discussion about how possibly we could be appropriately participate in this. And my focus, my focus is on the young people from the Waikato and Hamilton who went to the World War I and went to France. So it's very much, if we look at through that lens, would obviously want some information, particularly around the Waikato involvement, and without have an open mind, Paula, but I don't necessarily think our role in EPA and some kind of involvement here, appropriate involvement with our regional council and local partners, is mutually exclusive. But I don't want to preempt a proper process of discussion. But I what I'm looking for is, I don't want us just to give us a quick once over and a quick chat. I do think we do need to do some reflection. And I think Ewan's highlighted that we've had a long history there.
I really would support that, Martin. I think the critical point here is the New Zealand division participated with a number of other divisions in the Battle of Passchendaele, what makes Lukenwa and Bodeni distinct was it was the New Zealand division, commanded by a New Zealand colonel, with a lot of troops from Hamilton and the Waikato that that managed to re-secure Bodeni and Lukenwa in its own right. It was a New Zealand division military maneuver rather than being part of many other nations' divisions. And so I was always astonished why we focused on Passchendaele, but I'm comfortable that we have, but I'm just saying that there is a real connection with Lukenwa and Bodeni. Anyway.
Yeah. Look, I'm happy to do some basic. I'll have to give the team time, and of course, COVID's up on us, so there've been other significant priorities to focus on. But I'll have a chat with Lance and the team as to how we can put some basic information around this. And as Don has said, he will send us their full proposal and the background information as well for our reading interest, and then we'll gather together what is happening around us in this and talk about whether it's something that council want to participate in any way.
I'm certainly happy to bring it to the annual plan, and if I can convince enough colleagues, great. If I can't, then that's democracy, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. That's why I mentioned to Don that it would be an annual plan issue. It's not sort of something that just drops in. Unfortunately, their timing, I'm coming to you, Jeff. Unfortunately, their timing last time was just outside of all the LTP. They were a bit late in getting that depth of information, what they were actually requiring. So it didn't become an LTP project. But yes, I think annual plan. Jeff.
Thanks, Paula. Look, I think that's good, Ewan, that you're going to do that. And I think Ryan's made a really good point. I mean, when you think about where a lot of the people who participated in this part of the war, they came from all over the Waikato. And I think if we were to make this a sort of region-wide effort in terms of the funding, it's probably got more chance of success as well. So it would be really good to enlist the wider Waikato in it, whether or not that we do that through the regional council or through the kind of mayoral forum or something. But it just seems to me if it's odd to go TA by TA by TA rather than the Waikato as a whole, given that then the troops came from everywhere. I just wonder how we might go about doing that.
Yeah, I agree. And we haven't got Ollie on the call either, so we haven't got his experience to tap into here. Yeah. But Lance, are you happy with that we just kind of have a draw together of the information that exists at the moment? But I don't see this as being an urgent piece of work. This is to inform annual plan discussions, but we can bring some information to the discussion.
Yeah, sure. So we can pull it all together. I think there's some good suggestions from elected members. Just find out what Waipa have been doing. And also, pretty importantly, is just where we're at with our relationship with EPA, what's happened over the last wee while. And then elected members can just weigh up that whole context. Yeah.
Is everybody happy with that? We can go earlier into the Te Awa thing. So that's at 11:30, isn't it, Dave?
Yes, 10 minutes or so.
All right. So if